An inspector calls Grade 9 essay, How does Priestley present the character of Mr. Birling? In the stage directions, Arthur Birling is described as a rather portentous man with fairly easy manners. The play begins with Gerald Croft announcing his engagement to Sheila Birling. Mr. Birling declares that this is one of the happiest nights of my life, because from a business and financial perspective, the Crofts and Birlings will no longer be rivals in business. He does not seem to be bothered about his daughter's feelings, but more concerned with the growth of his already immensely successful company. Mr. Birling declares that the marriage would mean that Cross Limited and Birling and Co. would be working together for lower costs and higher prices. The audience can infer how selfish and materialistic Mr. Birling is when he makes this statement. Arthur Birling confidently states his views about life. He confesses to be a hard-headed businessman, which means that he is ruthless and his main priority is to make money. He also boasts that a man has to make his own way in life, and the audience can infer from his provincial accent that Arthur Birling has worked his way up to his privileged position. Moreover, Mr. Birling's hypocrisy can be detected by this statement because he sacks Eva Smith simply because she is trying to make her own way. Arthur Birling seems to be obsessed with status, and we witness this when he arrogantly boasts that he was Lord Mayor 2 years ago, and there's a very good chance of a knighthood. In Edwardian Britain, the upper classes paid great attention and importance to an individual's position in society. Arthur Birling dominates the conversation at the beginning of the play, and his attitude and opinions were typical of most wealthy Edwardian men. Priestley intentionally does this to expose his significant weaknesses through the effective use of dramatic irony. Arthur Birling derides those who talk about the war and thinks this is impossible, but the audience knows that in 1914 the First World War began. Also, Mr. Birling's talk about there isn't any chance of war demonstrates his complacency. Again, the audience can detect his foolishness. Mr. Birling continues to arrogantly express his opinions. He talks about the amazing Titanic and it being absolutely unsinkable. This also could be a metaphor for the Birling family, because at the end of the play, their confidence, security, and status are totally shattered. When Arthur Birling speaks with such self-assurance, the audience knows he is mistaken and therefore should not be trusted. Arthur Birling is the first person to be questioned by Inspector Gould. He initially assumes that he can use his status to intimidate the inspector by mentioning that the chief constable is an old friend of mine, but this simply does not work. In fact, it is what Arthur Birling does to Eva Smith that activates a chain of events that leads to her demise. Mr. Birling shows no remorse about what happens to Eva Smith after he discharged her. He admits that she is a good-looking and a good worker, but he dismisses her because she organizes a strike. Mr. Birling feels no guilt and declares that he has nothing whatever to do with this wretched girl's suicide. The audience witness how merciless Mr. Birling is when he refuses to accept any responsibility for the death of Eva Smith. He actually makes a deplorable comment when he casually asks the inspector, did she go on the streets, after he dismisses her. Mr. Birling knows that Eva Smith would have very few options after being sacked, and may have to resort to desperate measures in order to survive. If we are all responsible for everything that happened to everybody, it would be very awkward. This quote sums up Mr. Birling's selfish and cruel attitude towards Eva Smith and the entire working class. Arthur Birling has made his fortune by employing working class people. Mr. Birling's callousness is witnessed when he laments that he may not receive a knighthood. He sacks Eva Smith because she organises a strike. All she wants is an extra shilling a week, and now he would pay thousands, yes thousands, to cover up the potentially damaging public scandal. It appears as if Mr. Birling is trying to bribe the inspector, which again confirms our views that he is a thoroughly disdainful character. It is clear the inspector has had no impact on Arthur Birling. In Act 3, when Gerald returns and informs the Birling family that there is no Inspector Gould, Mr. Birling's response is that it makes all the difference, which shows he has learnt nothing. He tries to make a joke of the whole evening when Gerald phones the infirmary and there is no report of a suicide. Mr. Birling foolishly says, "We've been had, that's all." Mr. Birling is shaken by the inspector but does not learn any lessons during the course of the play and is unwilling to change. When it seems that the inspector might have been an impostor and there was no suicide, Mr. Birling is overjoyed and mocks the others for having succumbed to the trick played by someone. It is Arthur Birling who ends the play with the breathtaking cliffhanger. That was the police. A girl has just died, on her way to the infirmary. J.B. Priestley may be warning his audience, and the likes of Mr. Birling, of the dangers of not accepting the fact that we are all responsible for each other.